So let's explore and talk about how energy initially enters ecosystems and why photosynthesis is really important for life on Earth. This process essentially just captures sunlight, transforms it into a usable form of energy that powers nearly every living organism. So at the lowest level, photosynthesis converts radiant energy from the sun into chemical energy stored in glucose molecules. Think of it as nature's way of creating fuel from sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. This is an anabolic process, so that means that it builds complex sugar molecules from simpler substances, which requires energy input, specifically the energy harnessed from the sun. The organisms responsible for photosynthesis are autotrophs. That's things such as plants, algae, certain bacteria. These autotrophs are unique because they produce their own food. So unlike heterotrophs, that must consume others for energy, autotrophs can do it all on their own. By doing so, autotrophs form the foundation of most ecosystems. Ultimately, the energy stored through photosynthesis supports all other organisms. It establishes the base energy source that sustains food webs, enabling herbivores, carnivores, and decomposers to survive. Without this conversion of sunlight into chemical energy, life as we know it would just not exist. All right, so building on this, let's move on and examine how this energy captured by producers is transferred through the ecosystem. So energy moves throughout living organisms. We're going to focus on the role of consumers in ecosystems. Consumers are organisms that obtain their energy by eating other living things. It's a fundamental part of how energy flows in nature. First, consumers get their energy by feeding on other organisms. These heterotrophs rely on autotrophs, like plants and other consumers, for their energy needs. This feeding relationship creates vital connections within food chains and food webs, ensuring the transfer of energy from one organism to another. Next, there's 3 primary types of consumers to keep in mind. Herbivores consume only plants. Carnivores feed exclusively on other animals. And omnivores have a more varied diet, eating both plants and animals. For example, we are omnivores. We eat plants and animals. A lion, for example, is a carnivore. And an elephant is an herbivore. This diversity in feeding habitats helps maintain balance in ecosystems and allows energy to be channeled through multiple pathways. Once energy is obtained through eating, consumers use it to carry out essential life processes, such as growth, movement, reproduction, maintaining bodily functions. Without this energy, survival and development wouldn't be possible. Finally, the energy flow from producers to consumers is what sustains life on Earth. This continuous movement of energy through different trophic levels supports complex ecosystems and the intricate food webs within them. Understanding how consumers acquire and use energy sets the stage for our next focus, which is how cells unlock and utilize this energy at the molecular level through cellular respiration. So we're going to look at how glucose is broken down with oxygen to produce ATP, which is the energy currency that powers all cellular activities. Okay, so let's talk about cellular respiration. We already talked about it quite a bit in the first unit, but it's a really important complex system, and so we're going to keep talking about it. This is how cells unlock the energy stored in the food that we eat. So cellular respiration transforms the chemical energy in glucose into a usable form known as ATP by breaking down glucose in the presence of oxygen. The process starts with the breakdown of glucose and oxygen. This is important because glucose contains stored chemical energy and oxygen acts as the final electron acceptor to help release that energy efficiently. When oxygen is available, cells undergo aerobic respiration, which produces a significant amount of ATP. That powers nearly all of the cellular functions. On the other side of things, anaerobic respiration happens when oxygen is not available completely or is in very low amounts. While it still releases energy, the yield of energy is much lower, which is why organisms rely on anaerobic pathways, why organisms relying on anaerobic pathways often have less energy available. It's really important to note that cellular respiration isn't limited to animals. Plants and virtually all living cells perform this process to sustain life, as glucose and oxygen are metabolized. Carbon dioxide and water are produced as byproducts, which are then expelled from the organisms. The key takeaway here, and something that I want you to remember, is that the energy liberated or given out during this breakdown is captured in ATP molecules, which act as the energy currency within the cells, fueling everything from muscle contractions to biochemical synthesis. All right, so let's see how energy moves beyond individual cells and organisms. Let's examine the food chains and food webs, which model how energy flows through the entire ecosystems. Okay, so these models are important for understanding the pathways that energy takes as it flows from one organism to another. A food chain is a straightforward linear sequence, so a line that shows who eats whom. For example, energy starts with an oak tree, passes to a green fly, then to a ladybug or a beetle, and finally to maybe to a bird. It's a simple way to trace energy transfer step by step. So on the other side of things, a food web captures the complexity of ecosystems by showing multiple interconnected food chains. This shows that many organisms have varied diets and energy flows are not strictly lines, but kind of interwoven webs reflecting the real life ecological relationships. So the arrows in these diagrams, food chains and food webs, are more than just directional markers. They represent the flow of energy, moving from one organism to the next. This helps us visualize how energy is passed along and highlights the direction of consumption. Food webs also emphasize ecosystem interdependence. They reveal how species rely on each other for survival and energy. So if one species is removed, it can disrupt energy flow and affect many others. This demonstrates the delicate balance within those ecosystems. So ultimately, these models serve as a really important visualization tool. They allow us to grasp the complexity of energy movement in ecosystems and help predict how changes like species loss might ripple through the system. Keep in mind, though, that a model is a model. It's not going to show you exactly the way that things are done or how complex something is. It just helps you visualize the systems.